All right. Looks like we're live now. Hello, this is Christian Idealism. I am here just by myself. No one's here. It's just me. I'm going to be responding to a video by Emerson Green. Let me just share my screen real quick and then let me see if I can get it to work. Oh, wait, the wrong screen. All right, let's see here. All right. Hopefully you guys can hear this. I'm not sure, I'm not like totally confident you can, but so yeah, this video, I watched it earlier today and just like so I can prepare a little bit. I just want to say a few things. So number one, I like Emerson. So this video is not an attack on him. I'm just here to respond to his questions. Um, and a little update. Wait, hold on, I did that wrong. So a little update on my recent conversion to universalism. I should clarify that I'm an inductive universalist, so I'm not like totally confident in it. Like I'm not dogmatic about it. So if people claim that I know for certainty that I'm saved, I don't claim that. Just two clarifications on at least that. I really hope that you guys can hear this. I don't know for sure if you can, but we're going to start the hold on. I'm just gonna double check real quick, make sure, because okay, hold on. Why is this not? No. It's not share audio. Okay, I got it. Never mind. We're good. I just want to make sure that they can hear the video. That was the only thing. Okay, let's get started.
Answers and Reason made a video a short while back entitled 10 Questions for Theists, and it's a nice change of pace to be asking the questions instead of answering them, so I thought I'd ask my own questions. But first, a short preamble from Braxton Hunter of Trinity Radio. I can't say this about many things, but Braxton and I are in complete agreement about how these sorts of issues should be approached.
The worldview discussions space can be so combative. And when atheists and Christians come up with lists of questions that they don't think the other side can answer, those questions usually aren't genuine. I've never made a list like that, although I've responded to some. Here, I hope my atheist...
Oh, by the way, I did meet Braxton at the CC1V1 conference back in August. I did meet him in real life. He's a pretty cool dude. So if you ever meet him, just know like he's a pretty cool guy.
Interlocutors will consider these questions deeply without giving glib answers. These aren't meant to be gotcha questions, though I'm not asking for no reason. I expect you will have answers, and I want to hear what the most sincere among you have to say.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good point to point out. Like any question you bring up, like there's like a 99.9% chance that someone's going to be able to answer that question. Now, the question is whether or not it's an ad hoc answer to that question, right? Like if someone asks you a very hard question, like, are you going to give a satisfactory answer all the time? And well, no, I mean, it may not be a satisfactory answer all the time, but there are answers to these questions. So I just want to point that out to the audience that the questions he's going to ask are answers. Some of them are much more easier than others, but we'll get through them.
Who created God? Just kidding. What is your credence in your version of theism? As in, what is the likelihood of theism by your lights? Assigning too specific a probability to broad metaphysical questions feels a bit silly to me personally, and for the sake of clarity, sometimes I'll say that my credence in atheism is about 0.9, but really that just translates to a high credence in atheism. I strongly agree with the statement, God probably does not exist. Now take the proposition, God exists. Are you absolutely certain that P is true? Do you strongly agree or merely agree? Where do you fall on this scale?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I guess I should, if you talk about my specific version, I mean, I would probably go with strongly agree. I don't know if I would go like 90%, probably like more the high 80s. I mean, again, I don't like to put exact probability on how confident I am in theism being true. I think it's pretty high. I'm not sure if it's I don't think it's above 90. I mean, there's very few beliefs I have that are above 90%. So I don't know if I would put theism up past 90%, but it would probably be in the high 80s. So I would probably go with the strongly agree. Although I do want to clarify that that is my version of theism that I prefer. There are other versions of theism that I think are less plausible. As an example, I think that if you're a deist, deism is just highly implausible in my mind. I think that deism can't really explain anything, because if God can just do anything he wants, then that's not going to really tell you what God would do, right? So it seems like deism is not going to be able to have the same sort of explanatory power as like my version of theism would. So I would put deism like very, very low. Not, I mean, it'll probably be around the um, same probability as I put naturalism, depending on like what exactly where's that? Oh, we got a question in regards to epistemic or psychological certainty. So okay, that's that's interesting. So epistemically, I would put it pretty high. Psychologically, um, I guess I do admit that I haven't had any like strong religious experiences, so it probably wouldn't be like it wouldn't be that high in terms of psychological. But again, the reason why the reasons I'm a theist doesn't really have to do with my religious experiences. They more have to do with worldview comparisons and stuff. So yeah, again, I'll just put it relatively high. When it comes to psychological certainty, I'll put it about moderate. If you're talking epistemic certainty, I'd put it around probably high 80s, low 90s. Again, I wouldn't put it above 90 because I have very few beliefs that are above 90. Um, so yeah, once we start getting up to like the 90s, then you're gonna have to be much more stricter in like what you know and stuff. So I wouldn't put theism above that, but I would definitely put it in the 80s range. So, and again, that's just general theism. So if we're talking Christian theism, then obviously it's going to be a little bit lower than that. And then same thing with Catholicism. But again, I would just put probably just theism, my version of theism, probably just in the high 80s. So I hope that helps with answering the question. But anyways, let's get to the next question.
What can atheists learn from your religion? As in, what can people who are not convinced of the literal truth of your metaphysical claims glean morally or spiritually from your form of Christianity? Or does one need to accept all the metaphysical claims in order to see any merit in the moral and spiritual claims?
Okay, so this is an interesting question because notice how it says your form of Christianity, and I'm assuming he means a denomination. So obviously, I'm a Catholic. So my answer is going to be biased towards the Roman Catholic Church. I've been looking into more recently what's called, I think some of you are aware of this if you guys are Catholics. It's called natural law theory. That has a strong tradition in the church. I am looking into like what exactly its claims are, and I'm sort of questioning whether I should accept that view or not. I I'm sort of agnostic on that. If I did accept it, I'd probably accept a more liberal version of that. Although, again, I'm not really I haven't really studied that subject in particular too much, so I couldn't really say. So I guess it just depends on um what form you hold. So, like for example, if I were an evangelical, I'm not really sure, especially if you look in America, right? I mean, I don't want to like attack any evangelicals here, but it seems like the evangelical movement seems to be closely aligned with a lot of politics, and obviously that's gonna I'm gonna be very questionable towards their moral system, right? So I guess more generally, if we're talking just Catholicism, my form of Christianity, because I have to speak as a Catholic, I would say probably just virtue ethics. So I think that you can sort of derive or make sense of the natural law tradition without being a Catholic. I think there's interesting arguments for it, although again, I can't really say too much on this question. And I guess the other issue with this question is like, for me, it's like, well, this isn't a question about whether or not Christianity is true or anything like that. It's just a question like, what can atheists learn from your religion? And obviously, I think any religion, even if, no matter what it is, atheists can learn from it, right? In certain respects. So that's all, again, I apologize if this wasn't like a satisfactory answer to the question, but yeah, so again, there's lots of debates about what the exact moral system is, right? So some Catholics want to say it's natural law theory, others want to go with a more, moderate sort of modernist understanding of it, right? Others want to go more traditional, right? So it just depends who you ask, I guess. For me personally, I'm sort of agnostic on all that. I haven't looked too much into natural law theory, so I can't really say anything about it. So yeah. And I would say that, I mean, obviously, I think there are at least some moral claims that I think are true, even if God doesn't exist, right? So I think, I'm a more realist. So if you're a more realist, then I think it's pretty obvious that like murder is wrong or rape is wrong. Like obviously there are things, if more realism is true, obviously there are things that are wrong, right? That you can sort of find in religion, right? And so in that sense, I mean, maybe atheists can learn from your religion, but again, it's hard for me to answer this question because I haven't looked too much into this. So Emerson, if you're watching this, I apologize if this wasn't a satisfactory answer, but it's all I got for now. Anyways, let's go to the next question.
For instance, I think Paul's advice in Philippians 4:8 to meditate on the true, the good, and the beautiful is wise regardless of your opinion on God's existence. If your son or daughter began dating an atheist, would you be uncomfortable with that, even if they were a moral and intelligent person who truly seemed to have your child's best interest at heart?
Okay, it's a pretty easy question. I wouldn't care. I honestly, now I have to be careful here because if we're talking just dating, right? I wouldn't really care. Although if we're talking about marriage, that's a different story. I will say that. So if they began dating an atheist, well, I wouldn't really have an issue with that. But if they wanted to marry an atheist and like, I don't know, like abandon the religion or something, then I would start to question that relationship. Although I would probably have to, in this case, I mean, if it were, well, it wouldn't really matter if it was my son or daughter that did this, but like, okay, so for example, if let's say I had a son and he started dating like some atheist girl and she was like super nice and sweet and stuff, I wouldn't really care all too much. Although if he decided to, like, at the end of the day, it's gonna be up to him whether he wants to be a Christian or not, right? I can't force him to be a Christian or much less a Catholic for that matter, right? So my whatever my kids grow up to be, whatever they believe, that they're gonna believe what they want, right? It's up to them. They can believe in whatever they think is true. They can believe it, right? I'm not gonna force them to uh, believe in Christianity or Catholicism for that matter, right? So as long as, in this case, I mean, as long as the person that they're with is a good moral person, right? To me, it doesn't really matter because they can believe whatever they want, whatever they think is true. They can believe what they want. Now, of course, I'm going to give them the tools to make sure that they can reach truth, right? I'll present to them arguments that I've come up with for God. Also bring up like Swinburne, and I'll also probably even have them like read atheist philosophers, like read the other side. So there's a lot I would do to like inform them, but at the end of the day, when it comes to like what they actually believe, I can't control that. So I wouldn't really care as long as the person that they're with is a moral person. Then it doesn't really matter what they believe, right? So that's all I gotta say on that.
Do you believe in eternal conscious torment?
Yes, I do. I know some people may be shocked by that because I was a inductive universalist. But again, I will eventually do a video on this. But as far as eternal conscious torment goes, I do think that is ultimately what hell is. But again, I think the reason. So I should also clarify a few other things. So the first thing is we have to talk about what the nature of hell is, right? So if hell is like Dante's Inferno, then obviously, eternal conscious torment in that context is wrong, right? Obviously, it is a bad action for God to send people to that version of hell. Now, in the case of eternal conscious torment, it really depends on your view of it, right? So if you're going to say that someone just eternally rejects God forever, well, I mean, in that case, it's not really bad that God leaves them in that state. I mean, it's not like God can just, force them to accept it. Now, of course, one could argue that it's implausible that someone would eternally reject God, and I would agree with them. Like that's why I'm a sort of inductive universalist. I think that it's just highly implausible that somebody or a group of people are going to choose to eternally reject God, right? I think that whatever hell is, if we're defining hell as this eternal state, this eternal conscious torment state, where they're just eternally rejecting God forever, well, I can just deny that anybody goes to that state at all, right? At least as a Catholic. Now, there might be some other, views you could take on that as well. But at least for me personally, I could just, if I want to be consistent with a sort of like inductive universalism, I could just say, well, no one goes to hell, because what hell is just the eternal action of rejecting God. And I could just say, well, it's just not really plausible that anybody would do that, right? And there's other. I know some people may.
If you do,
sorry. One other clarification: some other people might try to argue, oh well, what about mortal sin, right? What if you die in a state of mortal sin and then you go straight to hell? Isn't that like an example where someone can eternally reject God? Well, yeah, but here's the issue: is in that case, I mean, how do you even know whether or not they were in a state of mortal sin? And then not only that, but like, what's your view of like the person itself, right? What's your view of sin? So if your view of sin is that it's a privation, right? Then obviously it just seems highly implausible that it can last forever, right? So in that case, nobody goes to hell, right? If you sort of interpret it in that context. So again, it just depends on what your view is. I would say that eternal conscious torment, I think there are a handful of versions of eternal conscious torment that are not incompatible with perfect being theism, right? I mean, maybe Emerson disagrees with me on this. I don't know. Maybe he thinks like, I don't know, annihilationism is a better option, or, perhaps universalism or something. But I mean, for me personally, I'm not sure if eternal conscious torment by itself, if we're just talking about that I'm not convinced that that itself is immoral, right? At least for immoral for God to allow, because it really depends on what exactly the state of hell is, right? So again, I've already explained this a few minutes ago. I don't want to repeat myself, but it just depends on what your view of hell is. So if you take a sort of C.S. Lewis view of hell, right, where hell is just you eternally pursuing something that's not God, well, then in that case, I mean, there's nothing really bad about that. I mean, there's just all that's really happening in that case is the soul is pursuing something that's not God, and they think that whatever they're pursuing will, make them happy. But is that necessarily a bad thing? I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? I'm not convinced it is, because again, like I said earlier, I just don't think that eternal conscious torment by itself is necessarily bad. But again, I would agree with Emerson that if we're talking like Dante's Inferno, or like, especially the versions of hell that I was taught when I was a kid, like I obviously I agree, like that view of hell is just absolutely wrong. But yeah, I hope this answers your question, Emerson. Hopefully it was satisfying enough. I don't know, maybe we can talk about this more on Discord or something. But anyways, I'm gonna continue on with the next question.
what does one have to do or not do to end up in such a state? If you don't believe in eternal conscious torment or eternal torture, do you find it as morally insane as I do? I think eternal
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, like I said, it depends on how you look at it. So it depends on like what exactly the nature and psychology of hell is. So obviously, if people are in hell and like trying to like constantly like climb their way out, right? Obviously, that's not a good place, right? But again, if you view hell as just this place of where the fires of hell are internal to the soul, um, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a bad sort of like immoral version of hell. So
conscious torment is the most morally unjustifiable, demented idea that has ever been conceived by human beings. I cannot think of something worse than eternal torture.
well, yeah, I mean, obviously, if that's what hell is, like if this picture that Emerson is pointing out here, if that's what hell is, then yeah, I agree. Like that's just wrong, right? I mean, that version of hell is obviously like so just wrong that I'm not convinced that an all good God would create such a place like that. Um, so yeah, I agree with that. But again, that wasn't the original question. But anyways,
And I can't imagine any crime that would merit torture that lasted for trillions of years, let alone eternity. I mean, maybe Hitler deserves to burn for a while, but eventually you say mercy. If you don't, you're worse than him. I think many Christians underestimate how bizarre this idea is to anyone who isn't steeped in Christian culture. Why can't we be saved after our deaths? Why do we have to get the right answer in this life? Doesn't that seem pretty arbitrary? More would certainly be saved if we could
okay, so let me
make a decision after we're presented with better evidence of God's existence and clearer information about what God wants from us. Doesn't God will all to be saved?
Okay, so this was probably the most difficult question, because in the Catechism, once you die, there's the immediate judgment, right? So it depends on a few things. As I have to be consistent with Catholic theology here. So one of them is this idea of invincible ignorance, right? So as long as the creature, in this case, let's just say that you have an atheist that's just not convinced that God exists, or maybe just not convinced that Catholicism is true or whatever, right? In that case, they would not be morally as susceptible to judgment as someone that did know that that it was true or something, or was convinced that it was true, right? Because in that case, I mean, then we're going into mortal sin, because what mortal sin is when you believe that what you're doing is wrong and yet you still decide to do it, right? So there has to be those conditions. There has to be the knowledge, there has to be the intention, and I think there also and it has to be a grave act as well. So it has to be something really bad, has to be something that so something that you actually believe is bad, and yet you still, despite those 2 points, so despite the fact that it's bad, you believe it's bad, it is bad, and yet you still do it, well, that's a mortal sin, right? That's what's going to send you to hell, right? And so in that case, if you die in a state of mortal sin, well, that's it, right? I mean, you've committed an act that's both bad, you knew it was bad, and yet you still decide to do it. I mean, that is quite literally like a very, very bad action to do, right, against God, right? So in that case, I mean, in that, at least the state of that, right? If you don't go to confession, if you don't like repent, right, um, then you go to hell. Now, again, I also want to clarify, I am a sort of inductive universalist on this matter. So I do think that there is some aspect of the self that can be sort of beautified after hell. But again, I don't want to get too much into details here about that, because it would take way too long for me to explain how exactly I think hell works. But anyways, so the question is, why can't we be saved after our deaths? Well, it depends on what it is, right? So in the case of atheists, right? So if they don't believe that that it's a bad act, then it's not a bad act, right? because there's just not, they're not convinced of like the truth of Catholicism, for example. So in that case, God's not gonna hold them accountable to the same standard as like someone who does believe that it's a bad action or whatever, right? So I guess I should try to answer the central question, which is why can't we be saved after our deaths, right? I think the reason why that's the case is, I mean, it depends on who you ask, but one of the metaphysical reasons why, maybe just because, like, I mean, there's one view, there's Aquinas' view, which says like our our wills are like locked right after death. I'm not really convinced by that. I would take probably Maximus' view that while our wills are locked, our wills are locked towards good things ultimately. So that's what I would say, at least. But again, so if he's just talking about atheists here, so if we're just like limiting our, like, how should I say, if we're just limiting our just to the people that are just not convinced that God exists or whatever, in that case, I mean, they're not going to be held as morally accountable as, like, let's say a Catholic that like does mortal sins all the time, right? Because atheists cannot do mortal sins if they don't think that the actions they are doing is bad, right? So there has to be that consistent standard there. And I do think ultimately, I mean, even Pope Francis, he's said that like atheists are going to be in heaven, and I agree with him, right? Um, and I would also say that God does want all to be saved, right, as well. God desires all to be saved. I'm not a Calvinist, so I'm not gonna say that God hates people and loves others or whatever. No, God loves everybody. So I would say that God does will all to be saved, and that He's going to do everything in His power to make sure that that happens. Right. Now, whether or not it will actually happen is a different question. I happen to think that it's most likely going to happen, which is why I'm a sort of inductive universalist. But again, that's my view. Other people have different views about what exactly is going to happen to everybody. Whether or not everyone's going to be saved or not. There are some people like David Bentley Hart who's more dogmatic about it. Others say like definitely not. Like it's definitely universalism's definitely not going to happen, right? For me, I take the view that it's most likely going to be the case that everybody will be saved. Could I be wrong? Sure, but you know, whatever. I don't. It doesn't really matter to me. That's my opinion, and people want to disagree with that, then that's fine. But yeah, that's all I have to say, at least on this question. So hopefully, Emerson, again, if you're watching this, hopefully this is a satisfactory answer. I don't know. Maybe we can discuss this more in Discord, like I said earlier. But anyways, let's continue.
In your mind, what's the second most plausible religion or non-religion after Christianity? If you became convinced Christianity was untrue, what would you be?
Okay. This is an interesting one. Are you universalist? I'm an inductive universalist, so I say that it's most plausible to be true. Although, again, I'm not like certain about it. So that's what I would say. Okay, so back to the question. That's a hard one for me because I could say like, okay, I could say which religion I wouldn't join. So I wouldn't become a Muslim. That's definitely going to be true. I would probably I think that the Abrahamic religions only make sense within the context of Christianity. So I wouldn't become Jewish. I wouldn't join Judaism. If he's talking religion, it's sort of difficult because I'm not sure if I would convert to another religion. I think I would just become agnostic, or at least maybe I would hold to some like. Okay, this is the best answer I can give you. Okay, there's a few things. So either I would become a Buddhist, or I would become what's called an omnist. Okay. Now, what's omnism? Well, omnism just says that all religions are true in some sense. Okay. That's what I would hold. So I would hold to like some sort of like perfect being theism, right? But then just say that that Jesus was not God incarnate. So Jesus doesn't have authority. The Catholic Church doesn't have the authority to like, dictate what's true or whatever. So that's what I would go with. Basically that while God is perfect, while God loves everybody, like in that all religions are in some sense true, that it's not like there's one way to be saved, or at least it's not just like there's this one how should I say it? It's not like there's just one way to love God. Like there's multiple different varieties of ways to worship and love God, right? So that's what I would say. I would probably be either a Buddhist, or maybe I'll be a Buddhist plus some sort of omnist or something if I were to, deconvert. I'm not sure if I would be agnostic, because I mean agnosticism is the idea that like, you don't know if God exists. And obviously if I left Christianity, then I would probably just be like some like omnist or something. Um, Another option would probably be like my philosophical system would probably be like way more in line with like Bernardo Kastrup, for example. I don't think I don't know, maybe he considers himself a Christian, but at least when it comes to like idealism, so I would keep all those views pretty open. So I would definitely probably be way more in line with like Kastrup's view of like how the world works and stuff. Um, but as far as like which religion, probably maybe just Buddhism, and then with a little bit of Omnis. I don't know. Um, I the problem with answering this question is I haven't investigated like the Eastern religions as much as the Western ones. Like I wouldn't become a Muslim because I think Islam's false. I don't think there's any possible way there's no like plausible way for Islam to be true. But I definitely think that the Eastern religions, I can't really comment on those. So I would probably have to just like look more into it, I guess. But yeah, that's the best answer I can give to the question.
And finally, what are the best arguments for each side? What's the best argument for theism? And of the arguments for atheism, is there one that seems more convincing to you than the rest?
Okay, so this is a interesting. There's a lot I could say on this. Okay, so I would probably agree with Emerson here that the cumulative case would be the best on each side. Now, when it comes to individual arguments, okay, so the best one for theism, it would probably be, there's a few options. It's hard for me to like put an exact one. So there's Rasmussen's argument for a supreme foundation, which I think is pretty powerful. And then there's also Maxwell. I think it's Malkin's or Maxwell's ontological argument. No. Actually, no. It's actually Rasmussen's new argument it's his new what's it called? He presented this argument at the Capturing Christianity conference. Okay, the one that happened in August. Now the video is not up yet, so I don't want to like spoil the argument too much. But basically, it sort of like argues for the existence of God from the concept of perfection, right? Which is something that I really like, because that's what I do in my earlier videos. So if I were to pick like the two best arguments, it would be Rasmussen's argument from a supreme foundation, and then Rasmussen's new modal ontological argument. I think that's what he calls it. Or yeah, so his new modal ontological argument, and then probably maybe even his modal contingency argument. So the one that I think he presented it at like about a year ago on Capturing Christianity's channel, and I have like a version of it in a document. I sort of modified it a little bit. I don't want to present it here, but it's actually really like it's a really good argument, because it's really hard to like deny any of the premises. Like if you're going to deny them, you would really like, I don't know, you would have to, there's a lot of like, how should I say this? If you were to deny the premises of the argument, I would question whether or not like your theory about the world is like plausible, right? So in other words, what I should say is it's just more plausible than not that the premises are true, basically, right? I don't want to present the argument here, but those are the three that I would go with as far as the theism goes. Now, the best argument for atheism would definitely be some version of the problem of evil. Now, Skellenberg's argument from hiddenness, I don't find that at all. I'm sorry, I just don't think that's at all convincing. I guess it just depends on like what you mean by non-resistant non-believers. I think that there needs to be more work done on that argument specifically. So I think that the argument has potential, but I am not convinced that the hiddenness argument is necessarily like the best argument. I think that the best argument is going to be the ones from evolutionary evils, and then of course teleological evils, and then maybe, although Paul Draper's arguments also seem pretty interesting as well. Now, as far as the other arguments that are mentioned here, like Oppie's arguments, I'm sorry, I'm not convinced of those either. But again, these are just individual arguments. So if we're talking like, if you want to actually make a case for theism or naturalism, I would agree with Emerson here that cumulative cases are the best way to go. So, just forget about arguments. Let's focus on the cumulative case, right? And that's what I, do on my videos. And then Emerson, of course, does it on his side to present the atheist side as well. So, so yeah, again, I'll just finish off, and I might just summarize everything real quick. Hold on.
For example, Schellenberg's argument from hiddenness, Rowe's evidential argument from evil, the meager moral fruits of theism, evolutionary suffering, teleological evil, Draper's evidential argument from pain and pleasure, animal suffering, doxastic discord, the problem of heaven, Oppie's argument from naturalism, etc. I think a cumulative case is the best each side has to offer, but I still have my favorite individual arguments.
Yeah, wait.
So thank you for listening.
Okay, well, that's it. Let me go back. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, so basic summary is this. Number one, it's all going to be Rasmussen, of course, because he's so Rasmussen's argument from Supreme Foundation, Rasmussen's new modal ontological argument, and then Rasmussen's new modal contingency argument. So those are the ones I would go for theism. Again, they're all contingency type of arguments. And then when it comes to atheism, it would just be probably evil arguments. So evolutionary evils, teleological evils, stuff like that. Which, by the way, I am going to do a video on this. I have no idea when it's going to be released yet because I have not finished the script. I've had to rewrite the script multiple times because I have new ideas I want to put in there. But yeah, anyways, I think that's it for the video. So I just want to, a few things before let me stop sharing real quick. Okay, so one of the things about Emerson is I like Emerson a lot, right? Although I disagree with him, he's an atheist, I'm a theist, so we're going to disagree on that. But I like the dialectic that he sets up, right? I think he understands that there has to be more dialect on these topics, right? Definitely. And I really like how the fact that like he actually presents like the best, at least on his side, and then he tries to present the best on our side as well. He's just trying to be fair and stuff. So I appreciate that from Emerson on that. Now, people ask, well, why? What about deism? I've already explained this before. So I think that deism has like no explanatory power, at least has very little explanatory power. I think the reason why is because if you're going to say that God is indifferent to our suffering, it just doesn't make, it just seems like a form of naturalism to me. So it seems like, it seems to me at least that if you're going to say that God can do anything, right, or at least God's not constrained by his nature to do certain things over others, then you're not going to be able to like explain anything about our world, right? So that's why I put deism very low, because I just don't think it really has any sort of explanatory power. So yeah. I got interesting. The soul is set to one way or the other. Also, better evidence is a bit too subjective and rather stupid. God can give direct evidence, and many would still not believe. Maybe. Again, I mean, that might be a good, valid point, but I can't really say much about that. But ultimately, again, when it comes to like why there's no salvation after death, I think I've explained that pretty well earlier. Could Emerson become an idealist? Yes. I think he could. I mean, Kastrup's, Bernardo Kastrup, he's an idealist and he's a naturalist as well. So I think Emerson, I mean, maybe Emerson could become an idealist. I don't know. I mean, maybe he already is. I know he's a panpsychist, but I have no idea. I need to talk to him about that. But anyways, I'm going to close off the stream. We're at 40 minutes. I didn't want to go more than 40 minutes anyways. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. Emerson Green, I appreciate the questions. I think they're good questions. I think that Christians and non-Christians need to have these better dialectics, right? So yeah, that'll be it for today, guys. Peace.